Hey everyone, Sunyveil here. Before we get started with episode 39 of FECast, ECQ Festival of Inspiration, I have a few quick announcements. First off, if you are looking for part 2 of building the tournament-winning deck list, that's going to be released next week. There was an ECQ announcement, and I figured we should be on top of what's happening this weekend. Second, on the topic of announcements, Direwolf announced the next campaign that's going to be coming out, and Stormblessed and I realized it in the middle of the cast, and we took the audio of our live reactions to the announcement and put it at the end. Finally, FECast is made possible by our generous patrons at patreon.com. They help make FECast possible. If you would like to be like one of these lovely people and donate, you can go to patreon.com/Friends of Eternal. We are looking for an editor to edit and produce FECast as Stormblessed and myself get busier with the school year, and the support that these folks give allows us to compensate our future editor and continue FECast. So huge thanks to these folks: Cotillion, Ryder, Alcide Bava, Sigma Tank, Work Done Son, Chamomile, Chris Ye, D-Dub, and Yeast Out. Those are the folks that support FECast and allow us to bring you a new episode every week. All right, enough talking. Let's get on to FECast episode 39, ECQ Festival of Inspiration. Hello everyone and welcome to FECast episode 39, actually episode 39 this time, ECQ Festival of Inspiration. My name is Sunyveil, your host, and I am joined by my co-host Stormblessed. How are you doing?
I am doing very well. I am enjoying Expedition, although it's a weird format, but I'm as always excited for this ECQ.
Now, that's good. Everything that I've been doing recently has been toned down by the fact that it's been 100 degrees and we're getting a ton of smoke from the California wildfires, so it's just an absolutely miserable time. There's no air conditioning in my building, so I've been in a bad mood lately.
Are you role-playing by playing fire-based aggro decks in Eternal right now? You're role-playing the fires?
Yeah, if I have to suffer through fire and smoke, everyone else does. Well, I'm excited to see that there's an ECQ this weekend. I'm not too thrilled about the fact that the announcement got dropped between when we last recorded our cast and this cast, so we didn't really have much time to prepare for this week.
Yeah, I think that's I really don't like that we got a week to the plan for the ECQ. I really wish Direwolf had given us more time. I was like in the cast, I'm like, I don't think Direwolf has ever given us less than 2 weeks for an ECQ announcement. And then, literally that day, 3 hours later, they announced him just well, I have egg on my face.
Yeah. I think that is something a lot of people, a sentiment that a lot of people share. All right, so since we were talking about the announcement, there was also an announcement that the draft championship is going to be the following weekend. So this weekend, we have the ECQ, which this cast is going to be all about. The next weekend, there will be a draft championship, which we're probably not going to cover. I mean, we had that episode with batteries, but only half of it got put up on the last time. So if you were looking for the continuation of our earlier episode and building the tournament winning deck list, stay tuned because that will be coming after this one. We just have to talk about the ECQ because that's our brand.
I'm still excited about the draft championship though, because I got 85 draft points, so I'm one of the 34 that gets a bye. So that means it is my best shot to get to Worlds. After all this ECQs, after all these FECast, draft championship is my best shot.
Well, best of luck to you. I'm also excited for that. I mean, I just love draft, especially when there's something on the line. It's a lot of fun. I don't know, just playing limited against other masters is great. I don't have a bye, but I am qualified and I'm looking forward to playing in it.
And this one's more exciting, I think, because unlike last time we had a draft event, day one was sealed, which everyone was kind of like, why is day one sealed? This time, day one is in fact draft. You get I think 3 drafts in 21 games or something like that, or 1 draft in 21 games. There's some sort of weird number, and then of course day 2 is best of 3 draft, which is just amazing.
Yeah, the sealed format last time, and you only played 10 games or something, right?
Yeah.
Man and Mouse went 9-1 or something, 10-0 or 9-1. and I just didn't have a good deck and felt like I couldn't really do much.
Oh, and other exciting thing is that Darylf is covering the draft championship, if I recall correctly. So that'll be fun to
Oh
watch.
yeah, that's good because they didn't do that last time either. All
No.
right, well, that's exciting. You should expect to see that next weekend. But this week we are talking all about Expedition and the ECQ that is coming up. ECQ Festival of Inspiration is going to be the last ECQ, and I guess I should also say that this is the last event for the Friends of Eternal Fantasy League. If you're participating in that, we're just having a short 3 ECQ season this time, and then points will reset after this weekend and go on to whatever our next ECQ season is. Right now, D-Dub is leading with, I believe, 16 points. D-Dub has a pretty big lead, but I think you're in second place, Stormblessed.
Yeah, I think what is it? I think that I like right before the ECQ, I put a bunch of barbs on my team, and I don't know why putting all those barbs on my team did pretty well for that ECQ, but
Wow, such a humble brag.
yeah, I'm D-Dub is at 17 and I am at 13.
If you would like to join the Friends of Eternal Fantasy League, it is open enrollment. You can join at any time. Just pick 5 players that aren't on anyone's rosters and an alternate, and that's your team. And we are keeping these players between seasons, so, snag them now before someone else gets to them. Anyway, now we're really going to actually talk about Expedition. So we've kind of identified 4 different kind of archetypes that the decks fall under, and we're going to go into depth discussing them shortly. But Stormblessed, why don't you just lead us off with what those 4 big archetypes are?
Sure. So there's sort of 4 main. I mean, I called them pillars last time. They're not really pillars. They're more like general boxes that lots of things fill in. The first box is of course fire-based aggro decks, which are mostly Skycrag at this point. Although you'll still see a bit of Rakano and a bit of Stone Scar, but they're hard to really compare to Skycrag as far as fire-based aggro goes. The second box is the Argenport Backbreaker lists, which sometimes splash time for cards like Diana, and sometimes splash fire for cards like Junkyard. And as Sunny said, really they're just splashing a different faction for more cylixes. Uh, and then sort of the third box is the Relic box, which can kind of contain Todas and Worldpire that both are trying to fight on a different level through relics to win the game. Then you sort of have the last box is sort of a mid-range-ish package, which sort of can contain Elysian and Xenon based decks, along with other various mid-range archetypes.
Yeah, so let's get started talking about these fire decks. I think that's a pretty easy level 0. I mean, Jack and Milos are both still in the format. Those are extremely powerful fire cards, and a lot of the surrounding cast for like the mono fire deck I was playing in the Throne ECQ are still there. Kazuo, for example, Thunder of Wings. A lot of these powerful fire cards are available, and I think it makes for an easy aggro deck to build. The reason why Skycrag is at the top of the list, and it's really hard to argue against playing Skycrag, is because you get access to Champion of Fury, which is an insane aggressive card, and you also get access to cylixes, and that's going to be a big theme about today. Cylixes make the world go round. They really are just better than not having cylixes. And when you play Skycrag, you get access to them. You also get access to Permafrost, Backlash as a market option from Blazing Salvo. And I mean, it's got a lot of power to it. And if you like aggro decks, it seems like a powerful deck, although I do think that the tools are there to fight against it.
There's also a Skycrag aggro tokens list out there, playing cards like Mobilize and even like Tend the Flock if you really want to go that hard, and like you play like Steam Blast. And that's another option for your fire-based aggro deck. But basically, Cylixes are supreme. Cylixes are just so good, even in like a aggro deck, right? If you have to draw a card off Trove, right? Have you ever drawn a card off Trove with your Jack? It's not the end of the world. But even in like Skycrag, right? You have Salvo to use the Trove as a free card. You have Jack, where if you need to discard a card, Trove's an easy discard if you don't have a Sigil in hand, right? So there's a lot of options in an aggro deck nowadays to just use the Trove without even having to play it. So it's just, and of course, compared to like Stone Scar, Cylixes provide 2 influence at the bare minimum, right? They come into play undepleted a lot of the time, and they just have so much advantage over non-Cylixes. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, for example, Champion of Chaos is a big reason to try to build a Stone Scar deck, or the Cut Purse, I think that's what it's called, the 2/2 that gets plus attack for
Yes.
each of your Shadow influence. So those are very powerful cards. You see them in Throne, and they don't work quite as well as in Expedition because, well, you have the seats and you have Vows, which only provide one influence. So, like, unless you're using Evangels to help add to your influence total, you're going to come up a little shy and not be able to unlock their true power potential.
Yeah, and Evangels have their own issues, right? Evangels are, there's not as much plunder in Stone Scar based aggro. You sort of have the Eager Deputy, but that was nerfed. It is now one toughness. It's a lot worse than it used to be. I'm not even sure it was overpowered before, but I guess Stone Scar deck diversity, right? So there's less plunder, but you do have Shavka Evangel, which is the best Evangel in an aggro deck. So there's a bit of potential there, but it's there's a cost to playing Evangels. So is there anything else you would like to say about the fire-based aggro decks?
Yeah, just a quick shout out to Gibbon Plus Plus's custom card, the Siege Train, making an appearance in these fire decks. Awesome, good to see.
Oh yeah, yes. No, Siege Train is a I'm surprised by it being a staple of these decks. Like everyone's really loving to play that train. It's a spooky ghost train, or was a ghost train. It's no longer a ghost train. For those of you who don't know, one of the original card designs that Gibbon wanted to make was a ghost train, and it ended up just being a siege train. So yeah, for those of you not in the deep Gibbon plus lore, now you know that it was originally a ghost train.
You know what? Gibbon actually talked to me about this card before submitting it, and let me see. Okay, right? Yes, it was originally a Xenon card, and it had Charge and Overwhelm, and it did a similar thing where it would like build up momentum in cards that as it survived several turns. But I guess they really changed it.
We could have had a sweet Xenon card, instead got a dumb fire aggro card. Clearly Darylf is favoring Sunny over Stormblessed.
Oh yeah, I also said that maybe it should have Reckless in addition to this. Oh yeah, okay.
It has a really cool play pattern. Siege Train has a really good play pattern. It plays out really well. It has a good amount of secrecy while having a fair amount of like you can sort of predict what they're kind of plick. It's a good card.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so going on from fire aggro decks, we also have the Backbreaker decks. I think that these are pretty good front runners for what's going on and what you're going to see in the ECQ. So Backbreaker, the 5 double shadow relic weapon, it's a 6/1, but it gets plus armor equal to your justice influence. You want to pair it with a bunch of removal to keep the board clear, and while you hit your opponent with the Backbreaker, and you also get access to Roland, the new Roland, the quad justice double shadow, 2/5 endurance decay, and whenever an enemy unit dies, it gets +1/+1, and you get a 1/1 deadly flying. That deck is pretty good. I think that both Backbreaker and Roland are very powerful cards, and I think it also takes advantage of the fact that there just isn't very much good incidental relic removal in the format. There's no Banish, there's no Boar, there's no Pride Leader, and it's just a really big relic weapon is tough to deal with.
Yeah, it's a Backbreaker is a 5 cost like 6/7, like kind of 5 cost 6/6 on turn 5, but a lot of times 5 cost 6/7 on turn 5 even, right? So it's like compared to like Massive Greatsword, which is a 7 cost 7/7, right? This is 2 cost less for effectively the same card on curve, while on turn like 10, it's like a 6/11, which is just huge. It's just really beefy, and the key to those decks is the Roland and Backbreaker part is the sort of the core of the deck, which you can build around in many ways. But you're basically winning through Roland and Backbreaker. As I said, you can splash fire for mostly cylixes and Junkyard, splash time for like Diana. The main benefit of fire over time, in my opinion, is that the fire cylix and the Argentport Silex converge on Justice, whereas the Xenon and Argentport converge on Shadow. So you get your Silexes in your main faction, which is useful. But yeah, I mean, a Backbreaker, I think Backbreaker and Fire Aggro are kind of going to be the 2 level 1 decks of the format.
Yeah,
I think those are the 2 level 1 decks that you should look at to make sure that either you play one of them or you make sure that your deck has a good win rate against the one you think is going to be more common.
Yeah, and going a little deeper into these decks, I think that what you're splashing for is mostly just cylixes. And honestly, I feel like the importance of maximizing your justice influence in these types of decks is a bit overblown. It's not like you're playing cards that, like Aegean or Friends in Low Places, that need to have a certain justice threshold or else they're much, much worse. So I don't think that like fire is necessarily the better splash because of the convergence. If you have time cards that you want to play, like I've seen turn back time to get back a backbreaker and have it be absolutely huge, like I think that's a pretty good option for this. I can't think of very many cards that are super important as far as splashing goes, although some decks really do struggle with Wyatt's Junkyard.
Yeah, so the main benefit I think for going fire is that you get Wyatt's Junkyard, and you can put that in the market, right? And so that's pretty big, right? Compared to putting turn back time in the market, I think Wyatt's Junkyard is just a more powerful card overall. I don't think it's necessarily that. So like I think if the time cards are better to splash, then I think that the cylixes are, having the fire Cylix converge on justice is not better than just having the better splashed cards. But I do think that having the converge on justice is better. If the fire cards are comparable to the time cards at roughly the same power level, then I think the fire is better because the power base is better.
Well,
But
yeah.
if you think like Diana is great, which Diana is great, if you think that Diana is worth going for, then time might be better.
Yeah. So what's your opinion on a card like Siphoner Paladin in these lists? I've seen it, and another card I'm interested in is the 3/3 Warcry. And honestly, I've played with both of them, and they just don't feel like they actually pull their weight, despite both interacting with relic weapons, which is the core focus of this deck.
Well, I think it depends. I think that the Siphoner Paladin, I think that I think there has to be a great Siphoner Paladin build, but I think it's like very specific. Like I've seen a lot of decent Siphoner Paladin builds, and Siphoner Paladin is a cool card. I think that Siphoner Paladin might even be better in 3 faction variants, just because you can play you can play Unfamiliar Interloper and get value out of using it as both fixing and as a sacrifice outlet. Whereas, if you're playing like Interloper in just an Argenport list, then it's a lot less useful. Like, yes, ramping up your justice is useful, but as Sunny said, it's not like, the end of the world if you have 1 or less justice than before.
Yeah.
But I think Cyber Paladin is interesting. I think that Longhorn, I think it's Longhorn, right? Iron Longhorn? The Minotaur, the 3/3 Minotaur?
I don't
No,
remember.
Jadehorn.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I made this mistake last week as well with Jadehorn, 2 weeks ago. Anyways, Jadehorn, I think Jadehorn is necessary. I think Jadehorn is very, very good. I have been very much impressed by Jadehorn. Making 3 armor means that you can save your relic weapon for a turn. If you play it before Backbreaker, you don't get double swing, but you still get the extra armor, which means that you get the swing eventually, likely. So I think that the Jadehorn is really good.
All right. I just haven't seen very many double swings with Jadehorn, and it feels like you're missing out on something. But, Corrupted is an extremely busted keyword, especially on a unit that has 3 health, and just getting the incidental 3 armor might be good enough.
Yeah, it's a really good curve filler. It has synergy with the deck as far as, if you play it after Backbreaker, you can, get the double swing. If you play Backbreaker after and the armor is still up, you get to buff the Backbreaker. If you play against an aggro deck, you get a 3/3 blocker that also provides an 0/3 blocker that can just chump block, as well as providing 3 armor. The Warcry is not irrelevant. It's not like, the most relevant thing ever, but like, if you hit a Backbreaker, suddenly the Backbreaker is a little bit bigger. If you hit like Roland twice, then it already has 7 health. And if Roland has 7 health, then it dodges, I don't know, like Obliterate or something. No, sorry, Roland starts as like a 2/5? 2/5, yes. Okay, so yeah. So it would become a 4/7 and then would like dodge Obliterate, right? So you can like start dodging, various burn spells. So I think Jadehorn is very solid. Like, it's not going to win you the game in the way that Roland does, but I think it does hold the deck together as a very solid role player.
And one more note about that. If you're playing the 2 faction version, if you're just playing an Argenport version of this deck, you're going to lose to the Cylix versions. Like, it's just a miserable matchup. They just have more Cylixes. They just draw more cards than you do, whereas while all of your cards do basically the same thing.
If you're playing the Cylix version, the downside is that you then can lose to the fire-based aggro decks because you do have more power that will come into depleted more often, right? So there is a downside, a not insignificant downside to playing more Cylixes. Cylixes are great, and I might end up playing an 8 Cylix deck, but that's not to say that there's not just potentially massive downside either.
I don't know. I feel like you have to play a 3 faction version of this deck. That's just how I feel.
Sure. I wouldn't begrudge you for that opinion. I don't necessarily hold that opinion per se. I lean towards the 3-faction decks because I want to just play more cylixes anyways, because those are great cards and fun to play with. But I'm not convinced it's just 100% the superior option.
All right. Well, on the topic of having more influence, there have been World Pyre decks showing up, usually pretty controlling decks that end up using Wasteland Broker to put a 8 of the Huru in the top 20 cards, or 4 8 of the Huru, and then just playing them with World Pyre. They don't necessarily even have to be playing Justice to begin with, just because World Pyre gets rid of those requirements. And Goei Chanhung, who is a member of the Friends of Eternal Discord and does pretty well in tournaments, posted a version in the Discord, and I played it. It seemed pretty good as far as control decks go. Like I was pretty happy playing it. I don't know if I'm going to play it because it still feels like, it's just really tough to answer like a backbreaker or it's tough to answer relics from some other decks that might be out there in the format. But it does seem like a reasonable option. What do you think about the control decks that use World Pyre?
I never know what to think about them, to be honest. My instinct is that they're not great because it's just a very slow card without like 8 of the Hru, right? Like if you have to play like 4 Channel the Tempest main deck, then you're gonna have draws where you just draw a bunch of Channel the Tempest that can't do anything, right? It's the volatility issue, right?
Yeah.
Where you need to find some way to mitigate this. And then the problem is that World Pyre in the market, it was a good innovation there, because it mitigates the drawing multiple World Pyres issue.
Oh, I actually disagree, because I think that
really?
Yeah, I think it's better to just play the 4 World Pyre main instead of Transpose, because you're getting a World Pyre every single time. Like, yeah, you get Face Aegis, but you also go down a card and you use up 1 more power. And the 2 damage is just totally irrelevant.
Oh yeah, the 2 damage is irrelevant. I think if you want to play 4 World Pyre's main deck, I think that then you don't want to be playing the deck. I think that the Transpose is if you're not doing it for the Transpose, I don't think I like the deck.
Wait, but you're just getting it with Transpose every single time. Like, when I was playing that deck, there were 2 other options I could get in the market, like Circuso's Choice and...
So, one, if you need to, if worst case scenario, if you have to grab like Circuso's Choice, you grab it. But then, the key is that the 2nd and 3rd Transpose still do something, whereas the 2nd and 3rd World Pyre drawn off the top don't do anything.
That's not true, though. They do, because then you can like play 2 channels in the same turn.
Oh, come on!
And I know that's ridiculous. That sounds ridiculous, but no, it does come up.
No. If you can play 2 Channel Tempests in 1 turn, you can probably win 1 turn later. You can probably win 1 turn later.
This comes up in mirrors.
Oh, don't play for the World Pyre Mirror. I'm trying to win against the fire-based aggro decks, not the World Pyre Mirror. Trying to win against the Backbreaker decks, not the World Pyre Mirror. Yes, I guess in the World Pyre Mirror, having the more World Pyres is going to win you the game. But I don't play for the World Pyre.
I think that having World Pyre main is where it's at. Editing Sunyveil stepping in here to say, Stormblessed was completely right. I don't think 4 World Pyre main was a good idea. My current solution is to play 1 of Sandstorm Titan and 1 World Pyre in the market with the Transpose. So when you're behind, you can get the Sandstorm Titan, which does one of the best jobs of stabilizing, and then the World Pyre can go for a later game. But, oh boy, I played with the 4 World Pyre in the main deck. That did not go that well. Anyway, back to the cast. I don't like the Transpose market. It also gives you more options for Wasteland Brokers.
I also don't think that World Pyre is necessarily a good deck either. So
I think it'll surprise you. I think the deck is.
I'm gonna 100% lose to it. I just don't think it's not. I'm not gonna say the deck is bad. I'm not gonna say the deck is like you can't win with the deck. I'm just gonna say that I think that there are better things to do, and there's better decks that have a better win rate than World Pyre.
I think I'm more likely to play a World Pyre deck than I am to play an aggro deck in this tournament. I think that should say something, considering my history with what I've brought to tournaments that I've been taking seriously.
I just think the mid-range decks are the better option.
Yeah, sure. I think that it's between. Oh, you mean non-Backbreaker mid-range decks?
Or Backbreaker mid-range, right?
Well,
just mid-range deck in general.
So for me, it's between like Backbreaker decks and a World Pyre deck. But like, I think the deck is legit. You didn't try the Goei version, did you, or did you look at it?
I played a bit of World Pyre. Maybe I didn't try Goei's specific list, so maybe I should try that out.
Yeah, it's surprisingly good.
Goei's list is a Time Justice Primal list. Goei's list is playing 4 Helios, 4 Channel of Tempest, 2 Massive Greatsword. It is playing what I like in the sense of 3 Defiance, 4 Permafrost, 4 Lightning Storm, 4 Turn to Siege, 4 Shenron Speak. So I do like that aspect of it. Yeah, it looks solid. I might have to try it out. But it's not playing the World Pyre main deck. Did you update it to put World Pyre main deck, Sonny?
I haven't gotten around to trying it with the World Pyre main deck, but I think that's what I want to do, because every single time with the transpose, I was just getting World Pyre, and I
I
ended
think you
up
underestimate
going.
Face Aegis, though. I think you underestimate Face Aegis. I think Face Aegis is crucial because if you play World Pyre and they take it out, then you just lose the game because you just lost so much tempo. And
What card are they taking it out with?
with market spells.
Okay, yeah. So if you have a Face Aegis, they're just going to get something else from the market. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, they're just... So, if say you get the Face Aegis and you're protecting your relic, yeah, they can't deal with it. Instead, they're going to go get, whatever, like White's Junkyard or something from the market instead of taking out your relic.
Let's say you're playing against the Skycrag aggro deck, and they have Blazing Salvo in hand. They're not going to Blazing Salvo their own unit to pull something out of the market, but they would to take out a World Pyre to win the game, right? Or if you're playing like Crack the Earth, they might not Crack the Earth for something because they want to do a different tempo play.
I'm just incredibly skeptical, because I think that it changes their market decision and makes it so that they do something else proactive. They just ignore the World Pyre in that case. So like you're spending a card from hand in order to change their market decision to instead of getting Relic Hate, get something else.
I don't know. You could be right. I just take a different opinion on World Pyre. That's all.
All right.
Relic. So aside from World Pyre control decks, we also have other decks, namely Todas. Yes, you remember Batteries from last week has innovated once again and built a 3 and 4 faction Toda list, and basically using the old card Cheering Section, the kind of garbage rare from the past that is like 4 Fire Time Relic that whenever a player discards a card, you make a 0/1 Toda, and then you can sacrifice any number of Todas to gain that much power, and it costs 4 and looks really bad, but it's the linchpin of the deck, and the deck is surprisingly viable.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised the first couple times I played against it. It draws a lot of cards if it's given the time to do so. I think it's probably weak against the aggro decks, right? Like, it seems
Yes.
like it wouldn't do so well against fire-based aggro, but like if you're playing a control deck, it's really tough to deal with this because it's so hard to deal with their relics. I mean, if you had good relic removal, maybe you could knock out the
Cheering Section.
Yeah, I was thinking which one's more important. I guess
It's Cheering Section.
Okay, all right. So you knock out the Cheering Session, and then all of a sudden they're just kind of not really doing too much. But it's difficult to. They have 8 relics. How many ways of removing relics are you going to have? I guess they have 9 with the Shrine to Carve It.
They have, well, actually it's more like 16. They have 13 if you put it in the market. But there's Shrine to Carve It. There's Cheering Section. There's Toda Circle. And there's Azrite Prixis.
Oh gosh, I forgot about that.
Remember, the linchpin of the deck is Toda Circle, is Cheering Section plus Azrite Prixis. You take the 2 worst cards in the game, put them together, and suddenly you have an unbeatable combination.
Okay, so 13 relics. You how many ways of removing relics are you actually going to have? I think most decks have 1. Maybe 4 if you Wasteland Broker it, but even so, like that's going to be a slow it's going to be slow to try to get to those. So
Yeah.
that's how this deck works. It exploits a weakness in the format, which is kind of something we were talking about last week.
Yeah, if you're playing a control deck, you have a very hard beating this because you'd be like, oh, I'll just wipe the board. Well, one, you can't once the Cheering Section plus Azrite Prix is in play. You kill a Toda, you make a Toda. You can't actually kill the Todas that way. But then the other thing is that with Shrine to Carve It, you just can't win. They'll eventually play a Shrine, sack a Toda, attack you with like 7 Todas, and that'll be the end of the game.
Yep.
So then the last on our list of decks to be aware of in the format are the sort of mid-range decks. Yeah, there's a number of them. Like Compre mid-range technically exists, but no Cylix equals me no likey. But really, like Rakano mid-range, now that it's been nerfed heavily, it's kind of become more of a mid-range deck instead of just a stupid deck. Elysian is kind of mid-range. Xenon's kind of mid-range. The combination of 3 faction decks are very mid-range. Basically take a Cylix that's not an aggro deck and it's a mid-range deck, right?
That's a good way of putting it.
So Sonny, how do you feel about all these mid-range decks that exist?
So Wump definitely feels really powerful, and it works really well with Master Conjurer, which is another card that I've been messing around with that I think has a lot of potential, but the surrounding cast just isn't there. You don't have very good removal when it comes to those two factions, aside from Turn to Seed if you're an Elysian, and it's just really underwhelming if you don't draw the Wump. So I mean, it's just like this deck in a vacuum is probably fine, but when you're facing up against like, a deck that's playing Jack and Milos, like it's not looking so great anymore. Or if you're facing up against a deck that is, getting to a point where it's casting 8 of the Huru every turn through World Pyre. Like it just doesn't have its spot in the metagame, really. And it's not doing something powerful enough to, strong arm its way into the metagame. So I'm pretty low on these mid-range decks. I think that there are similar issues with basically any other mid-range deck you play. If it's like some sort of mono shadow variant or some Xenon deck, what it's doing just isn't powerful enough to keep up with the rest of the format.
I disagree slightly. You specifically were talking about Wump, or I think that like Xenon and Rakano also still have their place in the meta as well. And I think they do very different things, although they kind of fight along the same level of units, of just good units. But I think Wump is good enough to fight for. Wump is just absurd. If you haven't played with Wump or against Wump, then try playing a Wump deck, because if you play a Wump on 2 or 3, and the opponent doesn't kill it in 2 turns, then you just start winning the game by just throwing snowballs everywhere. And if you also haven't played a fun deck where you copy Wump and you just make a bunch of Wumps, party pairs, after copying it a bunch, ooh, that's really fun, because they stack really well. Because then you start getting like put 4 damage everywhere that you want. Oh my god, just multiple Wumps is gross. But I think Wump is worth playing for. Like I almost played Wump at the Throne ECQ. If I hadn't stumbled across how good Rakano was, then I would have played Wump and Friends, just a Wump deck that's playing a lot of units, like Master Conjurer and units and stuff. I thought it was a really good deck, and I think that it still has potential in Expedition. I think Wump is really good.
Well, if they kill your Wump, then what? Like, yeah, it's great when it works, but the fallback plan and like if you don't draw a Wump or if they kill it, it's just like not. It's really difficult to win those games. So
I like the Master Conjurer plan as well. Master Conjurer is good. It was better in Throne because you learned Imitator is easier to turn on in Throne because you have just more duels, and then also in Throne you got to play Ixtal, one of Ixtal for learned Imitator, and that was just absurd. So Ixtal made the deck a lot better in Throne, as even just a one of. But even aside from Wump, right? I think like Xenon is a very solid deck right now. Like I've been playing against Xenon a bunch. I've played with Xenon a bit, not as much as I played against it. Like I've seen Isomorphic on Xenon, and Isomorphic's a good player, and Xenon does some really cool things, right? There's even like 2 variants of Xenon, right? You can play like a time-based variant and a shadow-based variant. And I think that, like Aramon is still a really good card against a lot of decks. If if you're playing like a primal deck and you don't kill the Aramon immediately, then you can never kill the Aramon, right? If you don't permafrost it or turn it to seed right away, then it will just keep hitting you, and it'll just make it so you can't win the game. So I think that Xenon still also has a shot.
Oh, I agree. Aramon is great, but again, like the supporting cast isn't as powerful for the other decks. So which type of Xenon deck do you like more? Do you like shadow based or time based decks?
That's a really tough one. I think I lean towards Shadow, but I think Curtain Call is still a good card. I think Curtain Call is underplayed right now. I think I lean towards Shadow though, because Aramon is like Aramon and Ikaria, and actually people are playing Katra now, and Katra is just actually surprisingly good still. You play off faction vows. Gotta get your deck thinning in, right? If you play Katra, you can get your deck thinning in and not have it be a complete mistake of a deck slot to play vows when you have nothing to use them with. So you get to play vows and use them for something. So for those of you who like playing mono-faction decks and playing off-faction vows, just play Xenon instead, because you get to play off-faction vows and have them be useful. But anyways, so I think Shadow is probably where I lean towards, because you get to play like Aramont and Ikaria, and you get to play the weapon Pocket Watch in like the market, which is really nice. It has a really good.
Been a huge fan of that card. Pale Rider's Timepiece.
I think Pale Rider's Timepiece is actually pretty good in the deck, especially because I think that Xenon probably uses. I don't know how much I like the card still, but I think Xenon uses Broker as one of the best out of all the various potential ways to use Broker. I think Xenon probably uses it more effectively than most.
Wait, how are
Another
you
one
using Broker? You've got so many 4-drops that you want to play. If you're playing Katra,
that's true.
you
Yeah.
probably would rather
No,
play like Sandstorm Titan.
I guess Broker is probably more for like time-based decks, if that.
But then you have Ubzad and Sandstorm
That's
Titan.
true.
Like, I just don't see where
Broker's
you're
just
fitting in
terrible.
Broker
Maybe
here.
Broker's just terrible. They nerfed Broker. Get out of here. No longer a 4/5. It's so small now. Remember when it was a 4/5 Sunny? It was huge.
Yeah, because it survived Jack.
Now it's tiny.
It's true. I mean, I actually think that Broker does make sense in the World Pyre decks, but that's the only place that I can see it. Like, every other time I've seen it, I felt like this is a very underwhelming card in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, Jack still. I mean, I wish that like Praxis Cylix existed. If Praxis Cylix existed, we'd have a sweet Praxis mid-range deck, and that would be awesome. But it doesn't. So, anyways, in our notes we have a weaknesses section, which I sense a theme here. So Sunny has marked as 2 weaknesses as relic removal and sweepers, which to me implies that he really likes the World Pyre deck because it has both sweepers and has relics that don't get removed.
Well, I mean, what this is contributing to the power of a lot of the decks out there, right? Last week we talked about how no decks exist in a vacuum, and a lot of these decks that rely on the opponent not having 2 ruins or something, right? 2 things that just kill a relic. Can survive in this format, such as a deck going big on Backbreaker, or a deck that's really relying on relics to stick, whether it be Cheering Section or World Pyre. So I've looked through the format. There are not very many great options either in the market or just to play in the main deck for relic removal. I've tried Cat Burglar was not great. I think that if there was a Praxis deck, maybe Shatterglass Mage would be good enough to make the cut, but Praxis doesn't have a Cylix, and so no Shatterglass Mage. I think that Furnace Mage is in the format, but do you really want to be playing Furnace Mage? And then beyond that, you've got a what's this from? It's in the From cycle. It costs 1 and it's a fast spell in time.
The time one from Beyond. No, from not from Elements. From Within.
I don't remember, but
anyways, you guys know the card we're talking about.
It's basically a ruin, which is good in this circumstance, but you only get 1 of them, and if you're in fire, you get actual ruin.
If you're playing Time Primal Shadow, you can actually main deck the Time From card, and I think that's actually a very solid call because you can get a finisher and you can get relic removal. I think that's if you want to play a sort of control deck and try to shore up this relic removal weakness that Sunny has guessed will be a staple right here. I'm not sure about that because I don't know if relics are going to be that important in the ECQ, but if you believe so, then Time Shadow Primal is a very good option.
I mean, do you not think that Backbreaker decks are going to be a big chunk of
the
meta?
Okay, never mind. Yeah, you're right. I keep forgetting about Backbreaker. God, every time I forget about it, God, Backbreaker is so huge.
Yeah.
It's really large.
So, I mean, you mentioned playing in, I think it's Aurelian deck, the Time Shadow Primal, but what if it comes down to the late game and your card has transmuted when you don't want it to, when you need to remove a relic? That could happen too.
I mean, yeah, but you can also sequence your powers so it doesn't get transmuted, right? You can if you're in a matchup where it's important that yes, you can. I've played Aurelian control decks. It is very easy to not transmute your power.
I'm so skeptical.
No, it's actually very easy and doable. Because if you're playing market cards,
what if you just need to play your 6th power or whatever, and it happens to be a seat of film?
Yes, sometimes it will happen that it will be forcibly transmuted, and you will wish it wasn't. But that is actually fairly rare. It's actually rare. Because the number one is that you can go put the power in the market. 2 is that if you're playing a 3-faction deck, it's actually not easy to transmute because you might not know this. If you're playing 3 factions, you have a lot of, 3rd faction stuff, right? You're not just playing it. You can't just get it on turn 6 all the time. You really have to want it on turn 8 or 9 if you're going to play a control deck with the From card.
Anyway, the bottom line is that relics are hard to remove right now, and I think that's going to allow them to do well at this tournament.
Yeah, and then the other weakness Sunny has found is sweepers. There's only 3 sweepers in the format. There's like 4 sweepers in the format, but there's like, there's like Malediction, Cerso's Choice, Lightning Storm, and Shenron Speaks. And of those, Malediction's a market card, Cerso's Choice is a market card. Shenron Speaks, it has the unfortunate problem of being really heavy Combrei influence. So it basically is not that it's not well positioned right now because there's no Combrei Silex. And then that leaves like Lightning Storm, which I think is underplayed right now. Like I think like if you're playing like Elysian, play 4 Lightning Storms. Yeah, Lightning Storm kills Wump, but like did you know that you can like not play your cards if you don't have to? And after Wump transforms, Lightning Storm doesn't kill it. So Lightning Storm kills like Huntress, but like you're not playing Huntress and Lightning Storm in the same turn anyways, unless Huntress is huge. So I think that Lightning Storm is really good right now.
Yeah, I agree. Lightning Storm is really good. You said it kills Wump as if that's a reason not to play it. I think that is a reason to play it in case someone else comes with a Wump,
on
so
you.
That's
it. True.
Yeah.
Well, it kills your own Wump. I know people have said in the past where I'm like, it's like it kills your own guy. It's like, well, yeah, but you can like choose not to, like if you're playing it's like a fire aggro deck, you can just play Lightning Storm before Wump, or like wait till Wump transforms. It's not that difficult to sequence your cards properly.
Yeah, I would also
it's not only harsh rule.
Yeah, I would like to add Solar Blast as a card that actually might be playable. I'm not entirely sure because it is really expensive. That's the deal 7 to everything but players, and I don't know how relevant that is, but in a format where there aren't other sweepers, that might be the best you have. And the problem you mentioned with Shenron Speaks being a faction pair that doesn't have a Cylix is a huge alarm for that card that I think would otherwise be very, very good in this format.
Yeah, I think that, if we had Combrei Cylix, then I think that Shenron Speaks would be everywhere.
Yeah.
But right now, Shenron Speaks, you can sort of, it'd be really good right now if we had Combrei Cylix. Shenron Speaks would be one of the most played card in Expedition, I believe.
Yeah. So I think that this means that when you're making your modifications to your decks or whatever for the weekend, keep in mind that, your relics are probably going to stick. So if you're relying on relics, that's going to be a lot better than it has been in Throne traditionally. And if you want to go wide, you can just make sure that you have a mix of units that have at least 3 health. Like Milos is a good example of that. If that's what you're trying to do, and I think that those are 2 ways that you can attack the format and play decks that are otherwise don't look like they might be as powerful as other decks, but just slip on by if they if they can be built right.
I mean, that's why Scrag Hack Tokens has a shot, right? Even though it's more susceptible because Lightning Storm exists, it has more of a shot than it ever did because there's just less sweepers out there. So moving on, our final message, and you might have sensed a theme about this deck, is that Cylix is our king. The Direwolf tried to keep it down, they tried to suppress us, but we rose back up. They tried to give us off-faction smugglers as if that would stop the Cylixes. But they cannot. Cylixes will rise again. I know Sunny believes that Cylixes should be nerfed, right, Sunny?
Yeah, I said that when we saw them for the first time. I'm like, these cards might need to be nerfed, and that's kind of what I'm leaning toward. They're just so much better than everything else you can be doing. It's not even like no matter what cards there are in certain faction combinations, it's just rendered not very usable unless you have a Cylix in that faction. And I think that just makes them so incredibly powerful. And it's not just in Expedition. Like, our Throne tournament was also dominated by Cylixes, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it was dominated by Rakano and Xenon, which both, not coincidentally have a Cylix.
Yeah.
So I've been going on about how like Cylixes are the silent killer. If you're playing a non-Cylix deck, you will lose a significant number of games and not realize that you lost them because you didn't have Cylix. And I've been sort of pegging. I was trying to be conservative and be like 5%, but I think it might be like 10, 15, 20% if I'm being super generous to Cylixes. But like 10 or 15% seems more likely. Like you will lose like your win rate will be like 10, 15% less if you're playing. Or I mean, depending on how you look at that, it could be like if you're winning 60% of the games, you'll win instead like 40, 54% of the games if you're playing a non-Cylix deck. Or 50 to 60%, depending on how you look at 10% less. I'm not going to go that far. I'm just doing some quick maths here. So quick maths is that if you're playing a sort of mid-range deck with 4 petitions and 4 Cylixes, and comparing that to a non-Cylix deck playing like, another 29, 33 power or whatever. If you're playing a 33 power deck, which you probably should be because, 29, same thing roughly. So like if you have 8 copies of Cylix and they have no copies of Cylix, then roughly 25% of your power are just crushing their power just in quality, like on every level. Getting the Trove is huge because you can use it for free with the markets or just draw a card for 2. Right? Getting the double influence is huge because you can turn on your cards. If you're playing Jack or Kenna, Skycrag is huge. You can't turn on Champion of Chaos the same way. You can't play Bhutan because you just don't have the influence. So like on every metric, it's just so much more powerful. So like 25% of the time, one of your power, if you draw 4, roughly one of them will just be so much better. If you draw 8, roughly 2 of them will just be so much better. So I think that like 10-15% is not that unlikely of a number to determine as far as games you lose because you don't have Silex. What do you think of my really, really off the cuff quick math, Sonny?
I mean, it's difficult to say for sure, but it is pretty clear that if you're playing Cylixes, you just have a better win rate than if you're not. And that's how the Expedition format, that's how Throne is right now. They're that good. And yeah, I mean, if they're if I think that they are to the point where they should be nerfed, that probably is reflected in having a double digit percentage win rate increase. So I don't know what the number is, but I'm on board for that sentiment.
At the height of Jack dominance, do you think Cylixes are better now than Jack was then?
Whew, that's a good question because okay, so you didn't play Jack in that tournament, and I think that was the craziest thing that you've done. But you actually like top 4 or something, right?
No, I think I got top 32. That was I played a shadow based version of FTS playing Big Icaria. I lost because I played Icaria. I played Combust on Icaria to wipe their hand of their machinations, and then they immediately top decked the machinations. So
all right. Anyway, boy, that's a really good question. It wasn't just Jack. It was also the cards surrounding Jack. And I feel like that the Cylixes don't necessarily have that. Like they did when Rakano was king, right? Because the Rakano cards were just so much better and they had Cylixes. But like, I think that there are plenty of good cards that are in faction pairs that don't have Cylixes. So it doesn't quite have that effect. But boy, it's close.
Should they nerf Rakano Silex and only Rakano Silex?
I don't think they need to do that anymore, certainly.
So if you nerf them, you've been saying you think that needs to go to like 3 of each influence to turn on, right?
Yes.
If you did that, it would kind of just you couldn't really play it in a 3 faction deck. Then. Like, well, absolutely, you couldn't play it in more than a 2 faction deck. They basically become different insignias at that rate, right?
No, I think you could still play them. Why wouldn't you be able to play them? You just have to play. They just have to be your 4th power instead of your 3rd.
No, I'm saying in a 3 faction deck.
Yeah, I think
you still think you'd play like 8 Silex in a 3 faction deck when they cost 3 of each to turn on?
Yeah, sure.
Because
they still come and play undepleted. They provide two like seats late game. If you top deck them, don't come into play undepleted, or like if you need to petition for a seat, they don't come into play undepleted. Like the fact that they are undepleted with no sigil in hand is a big deal. So yeah, I think that would be fine.
If Silex is worth 3 each, that would really hurt my 20 Silex deck. I'll tell you that.
All right, let's wrap it up here. What are you going to be playing in the, or at least what's the front runner for decks that you're planning on playing for this weekend?
Well, I'm not an aggro fan. I like my mid-range decks, so I'm looking at probably a Backbreaker or a Wump deck because I really like mid-range, and I like Wump a lot. But I also like Backbreaker. Maybe a Backbreaker and a Wump deck put them together.
No, that is Stormblessed trolling. Do not listen to that.
Yeah, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't take that comment seriously. Take the other's comment seriously, but that specific comment, don't take it seriously.
Like I said, I mean, I think the Backbreaker decks are just fantastic, but I also am going to consider a World Pyre deck. I know that's I haven't played a control deck in a big tournament in a long time. I mean, it depends on what you consider Genev and Winchest, and even that was a long time ago. So, it's been a while, but I really think that there's a lot to this World Pyre deck, the one that Goi Chanhong built, and I'll be taking a look at variants that I can come up with. All right, so the next part of this show is actually a part that was recorded earlier, but we got interrupted in the middle of a cast to bring you some news about some new cards coming out. So I'm going to fit that part in here.
Also, so by the way, I don't know if you noticed this, but we just got an announcement about the new campaign.
Thanks, Direwolf.
In the middle of the cast, they announced a new campaign with a spoiler. So I don't know what your plans are. I don't know if we should include this in the cast somewhere. We have an elf
September
dragon.
1st. September 1st, folks. Okay, so looks like we're having a new... Is it a campaign or just like additional cards?
It said campaigns. Latest story-driven campaign. Awakening.
Ooh, that is exciting.
We have an elf dragon spoiler.
Elf dragon? Holy cow. Oh, it's an elf and a dragon. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's an elf
Akanta
dragon.
Ascending. Wow, there are so many influence pips on this card. That is crazy.
Oh, look, they have. Is this new what they're doing? Where they have space, they have a little space after 4 pips. You can see how many pips it is because you can see there's a little space there.
Yeah, they heard you complaining about
J.
Yeah, on Friends in Low Places. All right, so this new card, Akanta Ascending, is a 2-cost double shadow. It's a 2/1, and it's an elf dragon. When you have 4 shadow, when the Akanta attacks, play a 2/1 dark elf. When you have 6 shadow, gets +2/+2 in flying. And when you have 8 shadow, when Akanta hits the enemy player, they sacrifice a unit. This seems not bad. I mean, like if you have 6 shadow, it becomes a 4/3 flyer, and if you have 8 shadow, then they have to sacrifice when you hit them. Seems not bad to me.
Yeah, I think the card. I like the card because I like that it's another payoff for heavy shadow. Because right now the main payoff we have is just at any cost. I think giving us another heavy payoff makes the heavy shadow decks a little bit more viable.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to snip this and put it at the end.
Sure.
So let's get back to whatever we were talking about.
Yeah, I just saw that. I was just like, oh my god, I can't believe that they just announced a new campaign in the middle of the cast. Anyways, yes.
Okay.
It's right in the middle of the cast.
Thanks everyone for listening. I hope this is helpful for those of you planning on battling it out this weekend in ECQ Festival of Inspiration. Best of luck to all of you still vying for a world spot, including, of course, my co-host, Stormblessed. And next week we'll probably have the continuation of the deck building episode. And past that, well, we still need an editor. So, contact me about that because we would like to keep FECast going, and an editor would help us a long ways in that. Anyway, thanks again for listening. Tell your friends. If they're interested in Eternal, if they're not interested in Eternal, use your referral link on them and bring them to this cast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Until then, we'll see you in the friend zone. The Friends of Eternal Discord is the best place on the internet to get better at Eternal. We have players of all skill and experience levels all happy to help each other out on basically any aspect of their Eternal gameplay. And making all this possible is our generous patrons over at patreon.com. If you'd like to support FECast or Friends of Eternal, consider donating at patreon.com/Friends of Eternal. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, we'll see you in the Friend Zone.